Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Open Book. I am Billy Price, co-founder of BILLY Footwear, and I will be your host again today. So we've been collaborating with lots of nonprofits, and these nonprofits categorize on our site under our association partners. And today we have a wonderful conversation with another nonprofit. This nonprofit is the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. On screen with me today is a loving mom, a loving wife. She has two kiddos, and she is the CEO of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. So please welcome Amanda Moore. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me, Billy. I'm so super excited to be here.
There's so much stuff we can talk about, and I know we talked a lot about things in preparation for this. So I think a great place to start would be just describing what Angelman syndrome is.
Sure. So Angelman syndrome is a rare disease that affects about 1 in every 15,000 births worldwide. It's basically a loss of the function of the UBE3A gene that kind of sits on the 15th chromosome. So these individuals tend to have seizures, developmental delays. They have issues with sleep, which is no fun for any parent that sleep isn't quite a priority for them. They can sleep maybe an hour and be ready to go, even though the rest of the family isn't. But yeah, it's, most of the individuals with Angelman syndrome are diagnosed earlier on in life. It's sometimes hard to see the symptoms. It's been mischaracterized as cerebral palsy or autism, and it's usually diagnosed with a genetic test.
Gotcha. And out of curiosity, what's your connection to Angelman syndrome?
So my son, Jackson, who is 5 years old, has Angelman syndrome. He's actually a twin. So we have twin boys who are 5, Jackson and Baden. And early on, we noticed that Jackson had some delays. I mean, it was really easy because we had a carbon copy of him right next to him, and Baden was progressing very well on, through the developmental milestones, but Jackson wasn't. And so we early on, about 6 months, started seeing that and started talking to doctors, trying to do as many tests as we could do. We did the MRI, we did the EEG, we did the EKG, everything outside of genetic testing to find out what's going on. And, the answer we kept getting was, he's a twin. He's just going to kind of progress on his own. Let's just kind of watch him. We'll go ahead and get him into some therapies, but I'm sure he'll be fine. And so for about a year, we kept fighting this of trying to figure out what was happening. And around 2 years old, one weekend, we were just noticing that something was going on with him. We're like, maybe he has an ear infection. He just kind of kept coming in and out. It just was odd. And so I took him to the urgent care. And right when the doctor walked into the urgent care, he said, you need to go to Riley Children's Hospital. Your son just had a seizure. And I was like, what? Because when I think of seizures, I think of the really massive seizures, right? The ones that the grand moles, the ones that you can kind of, you see there's something going on. So we rushed him to Riley, and we happened to get a neurologist there that had seen 2 other individuals with Angelman syndrome. And when he saw his EEG, he said, I think that's probably what it is. So let's do some genetic testing. Finally, a year and a half later, let's do genetic testing. And then we got the diagnosis of Angelman syndrome. So that's my connection. My son has Angelman syndrome. When we found out, I was devastated, really crippled by grief, not really knowing what to do. And the only thing I knew how to do to work through that was to get engaged. So I called the Angelman Syndrome Foundation about 2 weeks after diagnosis. And actually, this was after someone from the foundation reached out to me because they had heard we were diagnosed, and a parent from Indianapolis called me which is where we're from, and said, I'm here. What can I do to help? And it was amazing. I mean, it was life-changing to be able to talk to a parent, to know that the diagnosis that we got, which doctors will, a lot of doctors say your child will never walk, they'll never talk, they'll never, you will have to take care of them for the rest of your life. That's terrifying. And so talking to a parent was huge. So called the foundation. So what can I do? I need to get involved. I need to, I want to do everything I can to find a cure for Angelman syndrome, as well as support families through the journey. Joined the board 2 weeks after diagnosis. And then about a year and a half ago, moved into the role of CEO here of Angelman syndrome. So it's been a journey.
So, Amanda, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
That is so incredible. And, I'd like to kind of back up a tad here because the emotion, I mean, I can't even, I'm trying to wrap my arms around what the emotion must have been like for that year and a half for searching. And then the emotion that hit you when you found out what was happening.
Yeah.
Because I know there's probably a lot of families listening in that could be in a similar boat where their child has some sort of rare thing going on and they're searching for that answer and they're in that journey. And can you touch on that emotion and maybe is there something you can offer up? I mean, is it just continue to press forward? I mean, it can be a real challenge and a real emotional struggle.
Yeah. It's terrifying, especially when you don't know. I mean, I think that was the hardest thing of not knowing what was going on and knowing in my gut something was wrong. And you'll hear a lot of our families basically say, like, we diagnosed our child. We forced the clinicians to do A, B, and C because we did the research. We figured it out. We're educating everyone in our clinical care about Angelman syndrome. It's unbelievable the knowledge this community has or has to have in order to really fight and advocate for their kids. So, it was terrifying. It was one of those things where we were pushing and pushing to find answers. And I think honestly, there was a feel like I don't know how other people feel, but I literally can still remember the smell of the emergency room when he said Angelman syndrome and like what that meant. I like literally felt like I came out of my body and was staring down on a life that I was terrified of. I was and Jackson was in my arms and everything went numb and I just blacked out and I didn't hear anything the doctor was saying. And praise God, my husband, who is a nurse, was asking all the right questions, remained calm, and then was able to educate me afterwards. But you grieve the life that you thought you were going to have or your child was going to have, right? And it's just like, you never think you're going to be in that position until you're in that position. I mean, I just remember I have friends who have kids who have a rare disease and thinking all the time, like, oh my God, I could never do that. Like, I just don't have the capacity to do that. And then you're in it. You're doing it. You don't have a choice. This is your child. You love them so immensely. And it's a hard to describe because, and like I said, I can still remember the smell of the room. Like, honestly, when I have bad days and I'm grieving still, the smell comes back to me and I'm like, whoo. So I let myself grieve. And I always tell families, I let myself grieve in that moment and I pull myself up and say, it's time to keep going. Because if we don't do it, no one else is going to. So we have to keep moving forward. But I think that the advice that I can give to families is don't keep asking questions, don't challenge, like don't stop challenging. Like, unfortunately, most of the time you're going to have to be like the strongest and loudest advocate in the room and educate yourself. And of course, reach out, like once you get the diagnosis, reach out to the foundation because that's what we're here for, to make that journey easier. Because I think that's you get the diagnosis and then you're like, oh my gosh, like what's next? And so our goal is to make that journey so much easier for parents.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, no, I mean, there's so many ways I want to go right now with this conversation. I mean, like when you're talking about just the smell of the hospital room, I mean, I kind of reflect on my own personal life. I mean, I remember being in the hospital getting hit with some news that I couldn't digest, and I can put myself there right now without too much trouble. And the weight that I was hit with, I mean, you never shed that, right? It's still there. You're able to move forward, but you never forget.
Right.
But in terms of Angelman Syndrome Foundation, I mean, when I go to your website, I mean, there's so much information. It's so incredible what you guys have to offer. So first, let's talk about the website. How can they find you?
Yeah, so just going to simpleangelman.org. It's incredibly simple. Once you go there, there's a section specifically just for newly diagnosed to help you through that. We want you to fill out a contact form so we can reach out. We can get you the resources you need. We just created an awesome resource for newly diagnosed individuals. It's called the First 100-Day Journey. So basically steps on the things that you you should be thinking about and doing in the first 100 days. Because like I said, your mind is kind of in a cloud, and you come in and out of those days where you just want to be in bed all day, sleeping, crying, grieving, or like tune it out. And so this is a document that's really going to just help you through that, so you don't have to stress about some of those steps. But there's really something on there for everyone. Newly diagnosed, we have a section for individuals with Angelman syndrome who are just adults, and like resources for you for the transitioning period. Everything you want to know about all the research that's happening in the space, which is moving so quickly right now. There's just a lot of, basically your one-stop shop, and the goal is not to get overwhelmed. So my suggestion and my advice would be, if you're newly diagnosed, just go to that section, fill out the information. And then, usually what happens is we contact you. We have family resource champions all over the world. So these are parents who want to support families through their journey in each state. And so if you're diagnosed in South Carolina, we're going to get you in contact with a parent in South Carolina to help you through that. So that would be my advice on the first step, because it can become very overwhelming to digest all the information.
Right. So that's the website. Do you have social channels as well?
Yes. So we are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. I am toying around with being on TikTok, but I feel like I'm too old for that. But I feel like that might be a good place to be. But as you can see, for Instagram, we're at Angelman_ASF, and then at Angelman Syndrome Foundation for Facebook. And really, honestly, as much as social media can sometimes drive us crazy, social media has been huge for our community. Now that they have a question, they can literally go to a group and ask thousands of families across the world who have lived this journey, what type of melatonin are you using? Or like, hey, I don't know what shoes to wear. You should get BILLY shoes because they're amazing. Like, whatever it may be, it's a great resource for families to connect with.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of which, we do have a collaboration going. So you
Yes.
can get to our website through their site. So for everyone that's listening in, it's the collaboration we have is it's a discount plus give back, because one of the lifeblood lines to any nonprofit is funding. So it's our pleasure and our privilege to be able to be partnered with the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, to be able to members that purchase their shoes at discount, there's a give back to help support them as well. So,
which is huge. I mean, I told you when we first started this partnership how much the shoes have impacted our child. I mean, most of individuals with Angelman syndrome are going to have ASOs. I mean, it's going to be a part of their journey. And so trying to find shoes that fit that have been a nightmare. And so when Billy's came around, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just so amazing. Like, where have these been all my life? And then also, like, I mean, the older you get, the function of trying to tie a shoe or do anything like that is a challenge. So the being able to zip is unbelievable. And I know that you have shoes for all ages. And so that's been huge for our family. So we really appreciate the partnership.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it really is our pleasure. And I mean, the one thing about the shoes is it's the function, but also the fashion side of it. So there's a sense of try to embrace a sense of normalcy to look like everybody else. So.
Well, and I think the one thing I love about it is I can't tell you how hard it is just to find things to fit the needs of your child. Like, I feel like I see our parents fashioning up these things to benefit, like to work for their child. And like in a perfect world, that wouldn't happen, right? Like there would be stuff out there for everyone. And so I think it's great that resource is there, that, for shoes aspect, it's not something we have to hunt down or create ourselves. I mean, before I was taking the shoe, having to cut out all of the insides and fashion things up just to be able to get his foot into the shoe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these look horrible, but they work. So, anyway, I'm very excited.
Oh, well, awesome. Awesome. Well, I know that there's a lot of amazing things happening on your end. I know that we talked a little bit about research. I know it gets really complex, but when you were describing it, it got me really excited, because it just seems like there's some very incredible cutting edge things that are happening real time right now. And I was hoping you could share some of that.
Yeah, like I was saying before, 3 years ago when I started on this journey with Angelman syndrome, like the landscape looked so much different. There was definitely hope. There was pharmaceuticals in the space, companies in the space. And I feel like in the last 2 years, we went from like 4 industry partners to like 21 industry partners who are looking for active ways to either treat or cure Angelman syndrome. And to me, that is just baffling and so exciting because, it provides so much excitement and hope for our community to see this happening. And, we have currently right now 2 really impactful clinical trials happening that could possibly activate the paternal gene and show some really promising treatments for our individuals with Angelman syndrome. So it's the fact that we have clinical trials happening in the space is it should give every parent in Angelman syndrome community hope this Christmas, right? Like it's really something to be excited about because it's not a question about if, it's kind of a question about when these treatments are going to happen for our families. And so, the one thing that really has inspired me about this community before I was even in this job was most of the things that happen in the community, whether it's the clinic network that we have at the foundation, research dollars, or family support, are really because of the hard work these families put into fundraise. Like creative beyond belief what these families do to bring in funds for the organizations supporting Angelman syndrome. And we couldn't do it without the families. And so really it's my pleasure to be able to get up every day and work hard and take the money that they raise and really do well and hopefully get us to across the finish line with some of these treatments.
That's awesome. The part that inspires me too is, that inspires me in a tremendous amount. But the part that inspires me even more is the research that's going on right now. We're talking about Angelman syndrome right now, but the research is also going to benefit, I don't know how many other types of things that are going on. So
absolutely. So many. There's 7,000 rare diseases in the world. And if we can unlock Angelman syndrome, I think it will. I know it will benefit other rare diseases. And so the fact that, there could be another rare disease out there that someone's working on right now that, could eventually benefit Angelman syndrome. It's just, science is unbelievable. And I told you this is not my area of expertise. Like I barely passed science and chemistry and math and all that fun stuff in high school. But to see be on the sideline and watch all this happening is just truly fascinating and unbelievable. And as a parent, it's just the most exciting thing ever to know that there's going to be so much hope for Jackson and kids like him.
Oh, well, Amanda, this has been incredible. This really has. We can talk for a long time.
Right.
But I want to give you the mic one last time, just to kind of share whatever's on your heart. You can talk about whatever you want. It could be stuff that we've already talked about or something new, but I guess it's kind of food for thought for all the people that are out there listening, just what's on your heart.
Yeah, I think for anyone who is just diagnosed, you're not alone. There is this amazing community that's here to help and support you. The one thing that someone told me when we were first diagnosed is this isn't a death sentence. Like literally, that's kind of how it feels sometimes of like, oh my gosh, my child has a rare disease. What am I, this is unbelievable. And, don't give up hope. Know that there's people out there to support you. And for all my families who are already on the journey or been on the journey for a long time, I am committed to be here and work really hard to support you all through this journey. But I just admire all of you and love you all so much for what you've taught me and the passion, the tenacity, and what you've done to get us where we are in this community. It's because of you all. And I'm humbled and just very blessed to be in this role.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So eloquent. Beautiful. I couldn't have said that any better. And I probably couldn't have said it anyways.
Oh, well, I just appreciate you and your partnership and your story and your journey. It's unbelievable. And just so lucky that our paths crossed.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's my pleasure. It's our pleasure as a business. And I think you and I are going to be long-term friends.
Absolutely. For sure.
To everyone out there listening in, thank you so much for tuning in. This was another episode of Open Book. We will have one more next week, so be sure to tune in. Thanks, everyone.